Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm doing another kind of sit down reaction type video, which I know I haven't done like a ton of in the past on YouTube. So I apologize for the lack of riding footage. I've had very little time to ride and work with my own horses, and I've been pretty stressed and just dealing with a lot on my plate. So I've been prioritizing client horses and work. And then in my free time, I've been trying to just take it easy because I'm really burnt out, I'm really stressed, and I need a break. So these types of videos are the easiest for me to do right now. I can do them from the comfort of my messy bedroom, and I can be indoors when I do them, and it doesn't require another person to help me film. So it's just a lot less stress for me. So I hope you guys can understand. I'm gonna be planning some more stuff in the new year so that I can get more content out and do more training videos of stuff like with working with Banksy and my other horses. And I'm really working on it. I really want to get there because I miss actually getting to spend time and do stuff with my own horses, and I need that. So I'll be back to that soon. Bear with me. Please be patient. There's a lot of stuff in the works, and I'll have some exciting announcements for all of you guys soon. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about training methods, and I'm going to look at several different people who've posted training videos online. They might be offering public training services and videos online, or they might just be sharing videos of them training on TikTok and whatnot. The reason why I want to do this is because the more I learn about equine behavior and the more that I start to know as a professional, the more disappointed I am in the horse world, and the more sad I am about the level of stress and discomfort and fear that is normalized in the horse world and just accepted as something that's okay, or even just completely written off as not even being a stress response and just being a horse, being quirky or being an asshole and so on and so forth. It's really disheartening to see. And in my opinion, a lot of the horse trainers who market themselves online and promise these quick fixes and to fix your problem horses like within 1 or 2 sessions and all that jazz, they are usually operating on a business model that isn't ethical to the horse. And my last video that I did about this was a shorter one on Clinton Anderson. It was one that I made for TikTok, so it was only a maximum of 3 minutes, but I also wanted to look at some other videos. And I know some people view these videos as just blindly bashing people. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm only going to select videos that I think are genuinely abusive and cruel to the horse, or incite high levels of stress for no reason when there's a much easier way to get the exact same thing done. And this isn't even to say that all the people that I'll talk about are bad people. Some of them definitely are by the degree they take their abuse to. Others might have just been misled or misguided by previous role models. And as someone who used to be someone like that, I understand. But if we don't ever call out and look into why certain things aren't okay, it makes it a lot more difficult for people who are wanting to learn and better themselves to figure out why one method is better or kinder than the other, if that makes sense. Otherwise, I am just talking about what I do, what I believe in, and the methods that I support, but not showing the other side of it and talking about why I choose to no longer partake in that way of training. So this first video that I'm going to share shows a horse who people are trying to clip. Clearly the horse hasn't been desensitized to the clippers, so they've opted to use a lip twitch. For those of you who do not know what a lip twitch is, it is essentially a rope or a chain loop. There's also ones that kind of almost look like crab claw crackers, and you squeeze the lip with it or twist the rope or the chain around the lip very tightly, and the horse will be calmer because it causes a release of endorphins to combat the pain and discomfort that they are feeling from their lip being in a noose, basically. And it makes them easier to deal with and do certain procedures to because of this. However, it's a band-aid fix at best, and you'll see what goes wrong in this video anyways. The twitch is like the least of the concern overall, in my opinion. It's the high level of anxiety that I think is so bad. So here's the video.
You know, you can just tell when there's something special about a horse. Like Pal here, I can just tell that someday he's gonna make really great glue.
Okay, so now that you've watched that, I can list off a million hazards alone in that video. When the horse turns away with the twitch still attached to it and the handle of the twitch sticking out, he could have freaking completely destroyed either one of those guys' faces when he turns. On top of this, he obviously could have hurt himself. And then obviously lastly, that high level of stress is just completely unnecessary. It's very easy to just desensitize a horse to clippers, and if you don't have time to do this, in my opinion, it is inexcusable to have a horse horse that is this stressed and not sedate it. There's a lot of sedation options that you can get directly from your vet to use for things like clipping, like Dorm, and they'll put the horse out enough even if they're anxious like this so that you can get the job done if you don't have time to desensitize them before clipping them this time around. However, I personally think it is lazy if you never commit to teaching your horse to be okay with clipping and you always twitch or sedate. I think that there should always be an effort to actually train them to deal with a thing rather than gagging them by chemical restraint, which would be drugs, or physical restraint, which would be the twitch. The problem with stuff like this is that it's so normalized in the horse world to do stuff like this that people will downplay it and act like it's no big, like it doesn't hurt the horse and like it's a totally normal aspect of training, as if you can't teach your horse to deal with a certain scary stimulus like a clipper. And I think that's the biggest issue. The people in that video had the caption as, "This horse is an idiot," and glue. The horse is not an idiot. The horse is a flight animal that is scared of something different and new that you have brought to them and not prepared them for. And as a trainer, it is your job to teach them how to do that. And if you don't, then that is your fault. It is not the horse. The idiots in the clip are the trainers, not the horse, because they set the horse up for failure in what they did. And this is what pisses me off so much about this type of attitude online, is that it often serves to just blame the horse, call the horse an idiot, call the horse stupid, cranky, grumpy, say that the horse is just quirky and they're just the way they are and there's nothing they can do to fix it. And they act like, the people act like they're helpless in this situation, when really it is the horse who is helpless, because nothing the horse tries to communicate or say matters to the people, and they just ignore it, and they act like they can't make any positive change in the horse's level of fear when they easily could by just slowing down and not using such harsh all at once tactics. The next person I'm going to talk about, people probably know quite well because he's been on YouTube for a while, called Think Like a Horse, aka Rick Gore. I have a lot of problems with this man, starting with how misogynistic and rude he is to women. He's commented on my videos even just as of last year and is extremely condescending, called me little girl, and basically just shat all over my views that I used science-backed information to back my point, and didn't provide any counter-argument of his own other than to try to disrespect and condescend me. So this is one of the major issues I have with a lot of male equestrian trainers online. Personally, I find that they often disrespect women and are super misogynistic, and Rick is no different in this way. Overall, what he preaches for handling horses I don't think is necessarily bad, because I do think that it's good that he looks out for the horse more than a lot of other male trainers do, because a lot of the really popular male trainers we see online and on TV are very quick fix, harsh, lots of pressure based approach. However, I was looking through his videos, and recently, as of just a few days ago, he posted a video regarding a bite correction, and his correction is not as harsh as most trainers that I would criticize. It really wasn't that bad. It was more to create distance, so I'm not going to call this part abuse. However, what he follows it up with for his explanation, calling it's just like when a foal is nursing a mare and they bite, the mare will bite their foal back. He's teaching his large audience misinformation because he's applying a correction and then following it up with the idea that the horse will perceive it as if he was a horse, which is not true.
And if he bites me, he's gonna get it. See, thinness of nose. Hang on. Teeth are about to come out and I'm gonna knee him right in the face if he does. He's getting close. Getting close. Oh! And he put teeth on me. So that's all the correction I needed, is to bang him. He knows what it meant. He knows he shouldn't do it. Same thing when a mom, if a baby's getting milk and he gets too rough, she will turn around and bite him. It doesn't mean that he can never get milk again. It doesn't mean that he can't rub his mouth on me. It doesn't even mean he has to run away. He just has to stop what he was doing when I corrected him, and he did.
In this situation, the horse, I truly believe, was just exploring with his mouth and using his mouth to check out the environment, which is what they do. Their mouths are like their fingers. Their lips are like their fingers. Sometimes they may make mistakes. I'm not saying that people should let their horses bite them. However, him showing a bite correction by hitting, I think, is inherently flawed, because lots of other people will have horses who are biting due to pain issues and other things. And if they're correcting them in this way, they're not checking out the reason behind the behavior, and instead they're just punishing away the behavior, which can be extremely problematic and can increase aggression. So I think it's a mistake on his part to frame this as this is how you correct a horse that bites, as it does not give enough information, and the information it does give goes directly against scientific fact in terms of how horses think and perceive us. So like overall, this instance isn't that bad, and I don't think there's any hardcore videos of Rick Gore actually abusing his horses. I just don't agree with the tone he takes towards women. I don't agree with his self-righteousness when he's perpetuating stuff that's not scientifically backed, and I don't like the fact that he is so anti-bit regardless of what bit that you're using. Like, he's even gone after people for using rubber or leather bits. I find that that's really rigid and ridiculous, especially with how hard he'll go at people who use these things, especially when there's numerous photos of his horses being ridden in bozels that are fitted way too low and sitting on an area where they can more easily cause nasal damage. I think it's pretty hypocritical, and while sometimes you can put a halter on or a bridle on that's not fitted correctly if it was on a different horse, and if you're going for a short ride or just walking your horse to the next field, maybe you won't fix it. I've done that before, so I'll give him the benefit of the doubt there. But if he's gonna do that and trash anyone and everyone regardless of how soft the snaffle they use is and how quietly their horse is going around just because they use a bit, then he damn well better make sure his bitless equipment is always being used correctly, or at the very least put in a disclaimer. Last thing about Rick that I really hate is that we have this grown man online that will actually bully children, and he has this entire thing about calling anyone who wears a helmet like a pansy, like they don't trust their horse, and mocking them and making fun of them. And I have a huge problem with that, because I guarantee you children watch this man, and he's setting up kids to get permanent brain damage or die if they are ever to have a fall or an accident, which is highly likely while you're learning as a rider, or even if your horse just trips and falls and you fall off of them. Teaching people that it's not cool or that it's something shameful to be wearing a helmet is the stupidest thing ever, especially when you're going to be perceived as a role model. This isn't to say that every adult ever owes it to all children to wear a helmet, but there's a huge difference between you choosing not to wear a helmet as an adult and you as an adult actively mocking people and making fun of them for taking safety precautions when you don't. And that's what he does. That's my biggest problem with him, I would probably say, is the helmet thing, because I think he's influencing a lot of people to make stupid decisions, encouraging them to endanger themselves, and then he's going and mocking people who do take those necessary safety precautions. It is stupid. I can guarantee that this man probably wears a seatbelt, and even if he doesn't, he's stupid for not. But he probably wears a seatbelt even if he thinks he's a good driver and that his car works and is in good shape. The same thing goes for helmets. No matter how well trained your horse is, how bonded to them you are, they are still a flight animal. They can still spook. You could lose balance. You could faint and pass out and fall off your horse. Your horse could trip and fall. So many different things could happen. We've literally had Olympic level riders who have suffered permanent brain damage from horses tripping while they're cooling out. There's a woman, I'll look up her name and then add it in later, who was a dressage rider riding without a helmet, just schooling one of her retired Grand Prix horses. He tripped and fell, she hit her head, permanent brain damage. That has nothing to do with the bond. It could not have been avoided with better training or being more prepared, but it could have been avoided by wearing a helmet, and that's why it's super irresponsible for role models like Rick Gore to make fun of people for wearing helmets. I don't agree with it at all. I think it's ridiculous. The next thing I'm gonna go into is something I've talked about a lot on TikTok, and it's how much I freaking hate when people hard tie their horses. For those of you who don't know, hard tying is when you put on a nylon halter, usually just a nylon flat halter or a rope halter, something that won't break, and you tie a horse to something that also won't break. The reason why I have a problem with this is, one, it's extremely dangerous. Two, it's not training, and people try to frame this as training. They'll be like, this is how you teach a horse to tie patiently. You just fucking tie it to a wall without teaching it how to tie first or to give to pressure and release, and you leave it there. It's training because I say so. It's definitely not spectating when you walk away and let the wall teach your horse pressure and release. No, it's not training. It is spectating. I'm totally kidding. Sarcasm. If you tie your horse and they pull back violently like that, they're not trained to tie. They're not trained to give to pressure. That's something you need to do before tying them to a wall, let alone hard tying them. Full stop. I'm going to include a bunch of clips that are absolutely appalling that I found on TikTok, and then I'm going to talk after them about why this form of training is so dangerous, so cruel, so lazy, and so selfish. I want to talk a little bit about why this is dangerous to the horse. First of all, when they're pulling back like that, all of the pressure from the halter is going right on top of their pole, right about exactly where the spine attaches to the skull. This is one of the most sensitive areas of the horse, and it's also one of the last areas of the horse to fuse while they're growing. So if it's a young horse, this is an underdeveloped area that's not completely fused, and as a result is much more easily damaged. And unfortunately, a lot of these clips are of horses who are not yet fully developed, meaning that they are at a higher risk of having permanent neck damage from this. On top of that, we're going to go into how this is a welfare issue from how they emotionally feel. The high level of fear and stress that is elicited in a flight animal when they are trapped and panicking is extreme. A flight animal's go-to thing is to create distance between them and the thing that they are afraid of. When they cannot do that, it is extremely stressful for them, and this results in negative welfare implications. And what this also means is that when they can't escape, when you get that moment where they calm down and stop pulling, that is actually called learned helplessness. It's the result of the animal realizing they have no control over their environment, nothing they do matters or changes their situation, and as a result, they stop reacting to the environment normally and go into a depressed state. It is not being calm. It's their body giving them a response to keep them from killing themselves or completely mentally frying themselves out from the level of fear and stress that they're feeling. But it's a depressed state in the brain. It's not healthy. It's not a good welfare situation. It is not training. It is not them being calm. It's the same type of idea as if I waltzed into someone's house, held them at gunpoint, hog-tied them, and then they stopped struggling eventually when they realize they can't get out of their ties. They're not calm then. They don't trust me then. They don't like what I'm doing then. They've just realized it doesn't serve them and their energy and their stress level to keep fighting because it doesn't matter. It's not going to free them. Same thing. So basically what people who use these types of methods are doing is they're basically like calling Stockholm Syndrome training. And I find that really troubling personally, because I don't know why you would want to gag and trap your horse to the point where they go into this state of being where they're so terrified and realize they can't change anything. So then they just go into this robotic state where they're not reacting to the environment properly. First of all, that's not a safe horse to be around, because eventually they could experience something that puts them high enough over threshold that you then get this out of nowhere extreme flight response that's usually very, very dangerous with very little warning. And people will say it happens out of nowhere, but really all they've taught their horse is to not show them when they're worried, because they don't listen. So the horse goes, what's the point in me showing that I am stressed if it's not getting listened to? And then they mask those behaviors, because those behaviors are also being punished away by the very people who are supposed to be there to help and support them. These bucking ones, a lot of these bucking videos are from the first ride of the horse, or they're just essentially people glorifying their horses completely exploding under saddle. Now, there's a huge difference between your horse throwing a few bucks here and there and going on a full bronc fit like what is depicted in these next couple of videos. When they go into this bronking state, it's inherently different than when a horse is just throwing a few bucks, because they're going into this almost maniacal, repetitive state of bucking where they're desperately freaking out, just trying to get the person or the saddle off of them. And usually what this means is that they've been poorly prepared, or it can also be a pain response. So I'm not dogging everyone who has a horse that bucks, and I also want to hold myself accountable in the past, because a lot of the bucking videos of Milo got me a lot of views and a lot of attention, so I posted lots of them. And his bucking was related to stress and excitatory behaviors from not being able to expel that stress and put it into something productive and lower that stress level. And those videos got me a lot of attention, and I think that's why these people post these videos, because they typically get a lot of attention and comments. And unfortunately, a lot of that attention is positive attention. And I'm going to hold myself accountable for the Milo videos, because I should have done more to deal with his stress, and I didn't. At the time, I wasn't prepared to fully deal with it and absorb it in the way that I needed to really help him. However, his bucking episodes do not even hold a candle to what I am about to show you, and there's an inherent difference between him and a horse that goes into this type of bucking state, because a horse like him is usually easier to pull out of that state, and they're not necessarily trying to unload their rider completely, whereas these ones definitely are. Now, for some of these, I understand these people could have gotten these these horses with an already existing bucking problem. However, my problem with how they portray the videos is it's very much about making fun of the horse's reaction and kind of like showboating rather than going like, this is a problem behavior that we need to deal with. And I think that also encourages dangerous behavior from other riders. So that's why I take an issue with it. The videos where horses are bronching in their first rides or their very first time being saddled, I have a huge issue with because of the fact that there's no reason that this should be conveyed as a normal reaction. This whole idea that like breaking a horse is like some Wild West, like spirit stallion of the Cimarron bullshit needs to stop. If your first ride goes that way, you have not prepared the horse well. You have made a mistake as a trainer and you need to go back and be very, very embarrassed about that reaction and take that reaction, learn from it, and adjust your training. It's not something to be proud of. I would be ashamed of myself if my first rides with horses went like that, whether they had a previous bucking problem or not. When I get horses in that have bucking problems that need to be fixed, first we make sure it's not pain related, and then I start them over completely, and the entire goal of their training program is to never elicit that reaction ever again in the first place, because you don't want to give them a reason to react that way. You're trying to limit and stop the fear and rewire their brain so that it's a positive response and they're not going to respond to the person in attack fearfully. Basically what these people do, if they want this reaction, they're just going to ride it out. Again, it's the learned helplessness thing. The horse realizes if they cannot get the rider off, that they can't change their situation, they go into learned helplessness. Now, if they get the rider off, you're fucked. It's teaching them that it works, and then it makes your job harder the next time. This is why you do not want to have these behaviors happening repeatedly and why they should be avoided. Even when you're trying to train that very behavior out of the horse, you don't need to elicit a flight response to stop it from happening and to encourage it to be less likely to happen in the future. You don't. It doesn't make any sense. It's the same idea as if you're trying to make a person less scared of a phobia. Your goal wouldn't be to go and scare them more with a phobia before you get started on the work dealing with why they're afraid of the phobia and systematically desensitizing. Now, the one video with this barrel horse I'm going to put separately from all the bronching videos because I wanted to talk about this separately. So I'm going to play it now. The reason why I wanted to talk about this one separately is because this reaction is the type of reaction that people would look at and say happened out of nowhere. Now, I wanted to talk about this because this is a very good example of trigger stacking. This horse was likely stressed before entering the arena for their barrel race, and maybe they had some instances in the warm-up that scared it, during tacking that scared it, and basically it became this bundle of stress and energy, and eventually when they hit the barrel, I view that the person's foot hitting the barrel is like the last straw. That's where they went over threshold and you get this big bronching reaction that appears to happen out of nowhere. But really it's not out of nowhere. The horse has just been slowly increasing its stress level until it can no longer contain it and take it anymore. And that's when you get these big dangerous reactions. And this is why it's important to try to catch stress before it becomes something dangerous like this. Because this woman isn't wearing a helmet. She could fall off and become very injured. She has a good seat. She stays on really well. I'll give her that. That's very impressive. Good for you. However, you are talented enough that you should want to preserve your head and your safety, and I know you're better than this. You can avoid this from happening in the future, and there are other ways to showcase how good of a rider you are. Trust me. I've been that person who can ride the bucking horse. You don't need to have that be your claim to fame. You can do better. But this is a very good example of trigger stacking and having a behavior that seemingly comes out of nowhere and is far more excessive than what elicited the reaction. So the horse's reaction looks a lot more extreme than what it should be for what happened with the barrel falling over. But the reason for that is because there would have already been stress there, if that makes sense. So with these next few videos, I wanted to talk about systematic desensitization, what it actually is, and the clips I'm going to show you are doing systematic desensitization poorly. And the reason I wanted to talk about this is because there's a lot of videos online on TikTok and other platforms where people are claiming to be teaching their viewer base what desensitization is, but they're doing it so wrongly. Desensitization is supposed to be where you're getting an animal used to a fear-provoking stimulus, but in small enough intervals so as to not elicit excess amounts of fear. And what we see online a lot is people calling desensitization where they're essentially trapping and chasing their horse with something that they're afraid of and just continuing to come at them with the same intensity rather than going in lower levels and gradually building up. The purpose of systematic desensitization is that you're creating a more comfortable response to a previously fear-inducing stimulus by slowly bringing up the level of intensity of whatever the animal is afraid of. This does not mean bringing the plastic bag that your horse is afraid of right close to them immediately as they panic. It means you get them used to it at further away distances and gradually build, because the goal is that once you have it at high intensity, there will be no reaction, and then that's how you know you've desensitized your animal. But the point is not to elicit a fear reaction. Now, we have this idea online that desensitization is basically just eliciting high levels of fear and continuing to do it until the animal stops and gives up. And then when the horse gives up, they call it that calmness, and it's like, see, they're not scared anymore. But we already went over this. We know the calmness is called learned helplessness. It's not the same as actually not being afraid of the stimulus any longer. So why I wanted to talk about this is, first, I wanted to point out that it makes absolutely no sense to intentionally try to scare any creature with something that they're already afraid of when you're trying to reduce the level of fear. In what world does it make sense to increase the level of fear and cause a massive fear response if your goal is to get the animal over their fear? It doesn't make sense. It would be like me chasing someone with a spider phobia down and dumping a bucket of spiders on them and then yelling at them like, why are you scared? Don't be scared. See, they're harmless. It's not going to help them. It's going to cause them a lot of trauma, and it can cause lasting issues because of that. So we're going to get into these videos that I'm talking. Now, this video that I wanted to talk about really bothered me because they framed it as, this is what 15 minutes of desensitization does. And first and foremost, I want to point out that you could have used another method with the exact same amount of time and had better results that could look very close to the calm that they are claiming to see at the end. So anyways, we'll watch this. And as you can see, the person just continues to approach this horse with the plastic bag that they're scared of. And the horse is scared enough that they're striking out, kicking, and behaving in a dangerous manner that could easily get someone hurt. So not only is this unnecessary from the standpoint of how traumatic it is to the horse and how they perceive it, it's dangerous to the person. So it's unnecessary for that too, because there's a way to do the same thing in a much more positive manner without eliciting high levels of fear and making the horse more scared of the thing before you fix the problem, and it would just be safer and kinder for both horse and human. So this is why I have such a problem with these types of methods, because it's taking a behavioral learning concept and taking it so wildly out of context, and then encouraging other people to deliberately endanger themselves by doing something improperly. You can desensitize your horse to anything without trying to intentionally scare them first. If you don't want an animal to be afraid of something, don't try to make your job harder by creating a higher level of fear because you're impatient and then having to work down from a higher level of stress. Because the more cortisol that is in their bloodstream, the harder time they have learning. Because the more cortisol that's in their bloodstream and the more they are in the fight or flight response, the harder time they have learning and retaining information. The same applies to people. So having a highly stressed animal is counterproductive in training because it doesn't help you out. It makes it harder for them to retain and learn information, which means that you're wasting your time if you're working with a horse who is in a high period of stress, because they're not going to retain the same amount of information that they would if they were at a lower stress threshold. This next video is kind of a mixture of desensitizing and what I was talking about with the hard tying. So someone has tied their weanling in cross ties. They appear to be chain cross ties, which means that they don't break easily. And a weanling, as we know, is a very young horse. They're highly undeveloped, and this means that the risk of injury to their neck and other structures is a lot higher than another horse. And as you can see, this weanling is upset enough that they're striking out and flailing. They could have very easily hung up a leg over the cross tie, and that would have been a complete disaster. And all that aside, if they'd lost their balance and fallen down, or even just the act of pulling back, it's harsh enough on their underdeveloped structures that it's a concern. So I want to tell a story that's not related to hard tying a horse who's not been trained to tie and calling it training, like in this case, but it's just in my experience something that I want to share to encourage people to never pull shit like this, because it's not worth the risk. Some of you who might have followed me for a long time might remember a horse I used to ride named Jake. He was a gray Holsteiner Arabian cross, and he was very talented and just a lovely, lovely horse. Unfortunately, one time when he was getting his feet done, he lost his balance and fell in the cross ties. We had quick release cross ties, but they did not release, and unfortunately he was wearing a nylon halter. The farrier cut him free as soon as he could, but he still was hanging for a few seconds. Now, The horse's behavior after that instance started to really change, and he started to have behaviors like bronching under saddle that had never existed before. So we were very concerned, and we were looking into things to try to figure out what was wrong with him, but it wasn't coming back conclusive. A couple weeks after this incident, he completely went off the rails and started running through a bunch of fences, and he unfortunately had to be euthanized. After euthanasia, they'd found that he'd ruptured his brainstem because the halter sits right on top of one of the most sensitive areas of their skull and where the spine attaches. And unfortunately, that would have been a result of his fall in the cross ties. So I want to encourage people not to do this, because with a weanling, you'd run the risk of something like that happening much more than you would with an older horse like Jake was. But that is one of the very real risks of taking these stupid risks in training. This is not how you train a horse. Weanlings are like toddlers. They should not be expected to have the same level of patience and ability to learn as an older horse. And on top of that, there's no reason to be doing this. You could teach the horse to be calm standing in that area by not tying them at all at first and gradually working on pressure and release until they're actually ready to be tied. This isn't training. The person has set the horse up for failure, stood back and watched and laughed, and then put a soundbite on it to make fun of the poor thing. And this isn't training. So now that the horse has had this reaction, they're more likely to be stressed in this area. So it's counterproductive for the person too, and super risky for everyone involved, because again, if a horse really panics and is in trouble and they're restrained, you're at a risk of getting injured when you try to free them. On kind of the topic of desensitization and properly preparing horses, we're going to look at this video of someone trying to pony their yearling. I believe the caption said this was a yearling, and they're trying to halter break it. And as you can see, it's not going well because the horse hasn't been taught how to respond to pressure and release properly, and it has no idea what it's doing, and the person's just pulling forcefully as the horse struggles and panics. Again, this is counterproductive. You're teaching the horse to have stress associated with being haltered and going out with people and doing things, meaning that your job is going to be made harder in the future the more you want to expand on their training simply because you chose to be lazy and take an approach like this. There is no reason for this. There are so many better ways of teaching halter training and ponying, and this is honestly embarrassing. People shouldn't be taking pride in this or making jokes about horses like this being a pain in their ass, because the only reason the horse is being a pain in the ass is because of how improperly and poorly they were set up. Now, last, this video I'm only including because I wanted to discuss reading between the lines when you're following people online and seeing how their horses respond to them. First of all, I think this video is a little bit irresponsible because I think it's unnecessary to park a stallion right up the ass of a mare in heat, especially when both of them are young. It's kind of asking for a problem to happen, and it's not really the horse's fault if they do respond to it. But as you can see, the horse's reaction to her just standing up, and in the video she snaps her fingers and says something to him. He responds flinching and backing up. That is an indicator that this horse has probably underwent punishment-based training that is scary, because that is an abnormal reaction for a horse to have to their person that they're supposed to trust getting up and warning them. And it's an indicator that when he has responded to mares in the past, that their way of handling it was probably to punish him rather than show him what they want him to do. And while he could have just spooked and it could have been a fluke thing, I wanted to show this video because when you're watching people online and trying to decide who is credible, I would highly recommend looking into how their horses respond to them. Because what I have noticed on a lot of these people's pages, when I see videos of them doing abusive or at least very bad training stuff to their horses, if I go look at their profiles after, it's very clear to me that their horses do not trust or really like them, because the videos that they show of them spending time with their horse show the horses flinching away from their movements, turning their heads away when they see them come in the field, facing the backs of their stalls, and in other ways just trying to create distance from that person, which shows that there isn't trust. And it should be a no-brainer that the way to achieve trust with an animal is not by intentionally overwhelming and frightening them until they just give up. That's not how you build trust, and if we were applying that to people, people would very much look at that as an abusive relationship and Stockholm syndrome. But for whatever reason with horses, people kind of beat around the bush and ignore that fact. So basically, just to conclude, the reason why I talk about clips like this is because especially on TikTok, I see such a high instance of bad handling and dangerous recommendations in training, and I really worry for people that will blindly buy into this and believe it, because it's just asking for an accident to happen, and we need to care about how results are achieved rather than just the result. Because also when people say like, look, it worked, they're calm tying now, they're missing the fact that there might be a lot of displacement behaviors and problem behaviors that develop as a result of those training as a result of those training methods. And also I feel like people's need to do this to horses speaks volumes about the types of horses they're getting. And I also feel like the people's need to take on these really harsh, forceful methods is more of a statement of them as a person than it is about any horses they get. A lot of people who do this will claim they get a lot of rank, difficult horses who come from bad backgrounds, but they literally try to incite these types of reactions through how they handle them. So I think it's less about these being bad horses and more about how people go about handling them, because it's honestly, like, I get difficult horses in who are on their last chance, who might have a bucking problem, a bolting problem, biting, aggression, other issues, and they're problem horses. But my training will never look like this because I don't want to intentionally endanger myself or the horse or create a bad experience. And the goal in teaching those horses and helping them is to teach them to never have that aggressive or fear response that's dangerous in the first place. So when you're restarting a horse with a bronching problem, your goal is to avoid that from happening in the first place. And that's what good training should look like. You're keeping the horse at a low enough threshold so as to not get a dangerous response. And sometimes people may make mistakes and get it anyways, but the point of good training is that you shouldn't be looking for these responses. You don't need to intentionally elicit fear or stress or problem behaviors out of a horse in order to fix them. It makes no sense. You're literally increasing the stress level, making it harder for the horse to learn and retain information and making a bad experience, and then saying that that's necessary for undoing the problem that exists because of fear, stress, XYZ. So that's my issue with the online horse training world and with these videos, and I hope this provided some clarification for people, and I hope that this video was helpful. I appreciate all of you watching and supporting my content, and I'm going to be trying to roll out more riding videos and otherwise in the new year once I have more time and I'm less stressed. Also, I'm having a Black Friday sale in my merch store. You can get fun Christmas sweaters like this Let It Snow one that I'm wearing, or hats like this one that I'm wearing, and lots of other fun merch designs. Everything's 15% off now through December 1st if you use code BLACK2021 at checkout. I would really appreciate it. Support small, shop small. Working on releasing a lot of new fun things also in the coming weeks and months. And we are doing a big bridle restocking for my bridles in the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned for that. I'll post about it if anyone's interested in getting one of the bridles that I released. I'm really excited about it and I appreciate all the support. So I hope that this was helpful. And again, I'm not doing this just to bash people who use different methods. But if that different method to the horse is harmful and stressful, it's worth talking about, because how the horse perceives the way they're being trained is one of the most important factors in training. And I think it's important that we start to be more critical of stuff that we've kind of gotten lazy with and using force-based methods like this, since we know better now. There's no reason to continue justifying this type of treatment to animals. It's not fair to any animal. So anyways, thank you everyone for your support for my channel, and I hope this video was interesting. I just wanted to reiterate that people can work with horses who have behavioral problems and are dangerous horses without having these big reactions. I get in a lot of horses who have behavioral issues and are here for fixing problems like bronching under saddle, and my entire goal is to never elicit that same reaction, because it means I did something wrong and I went too fast and I missed something. So that's all I'm saying here. I think we need to do better, because this is embarrassing to put this stuff out in the public where people outside of the horse world can see it, because to most people this just looks exactly what it is, which is abusive. Anyways, thank you for your support. Just so you all know, I have a Black Friday sale going on in my store. You can order cute designs like this Let It Snow Christmas horse sweater for 15% off now through December 1st with code BLACK2021 at checkout. And I'm also doing a big bridle restocking coming up, so stay tuned for that. My bridles will be back in stock in the next week or two. I'll announce it. It's coming. Be excited. And there's lots of other fun stuff in the works. I so appreciate it, and thank you all for your support of my channel and my small business. It's amazing. Thank you.